Well, hello everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to our ATSE International Women's Day panel event. I know it's a couple of days before International Women's Day, but the calendar gets very crowded these days, so we're getting in early. We're going to talk today about driving gender inclusive innovation. And today we're going to particularly focus in on the importance of gender equity in digital technology innovation specifically. First, I'd like to acknowledge the custodianship of the lands and waters on which we're all joining from today. Personally, I'm on Camaragal land, and ATSE's office is on Ngunnawal and Ngambri land, and also the many lands and waters across Australia on which we all work, live, and apply science, technology, and engineering. We acknowledge the traditional owners, and we pay respects to their elders. We acknowledge traditional knowledge and the deep history of innovation it embodies. Today, we're about to talk with an amazing panel of women scientists and engineers about the issue of innovation and technology in the digital space, particularly how it impacts gender equality. We'll focus mostly on aspects of AI and how it currently impacts women and how it might be better developed for both cultural and linguistic diversity as well as gender diversity. Our panel today are, starting with Leanne Kemp, who is a founder and CEO of digital transparency company Everledger. Everledger provides technology solutions to increase transparency in global supply chains. She's also won the 2021 ATSE Cluny's Ross Award for Entrepreneur of the Year, and previously was Queensland Entrepreneur of the Year. Professor Shazia Sadiq is an ATSE Fellow and Professor of Computer Science at the School of Information Technology and Electrical Engineering at the University of Queensland. She's made significant contributions to responsible and integrated data quality management and is a keen proponent of ICT careers. Shazia has led and developed a range of programs such as national competitions and women in computing initiatives. Then we have Dr. Marlene Van Field, who is an ATSE IMNIS mentor and principal research scientist and group leader at CSIRO. Marlene has a PhD in epidemiology and preventative medicine, which focused on large-scale implementation of healthcare interventions utilising digital technologies. And finally, to wrap things up from a different perspective, is Veronica Karakousis, or Ronnie as she likes to be known, who's a 2023 ATSE Elevate postgraduate scholar, who's undertaking a Master of Computing specialising in data science at the ANU. So welcome to all of you. We're really delighted that you've given us some of your incredibly precious time today, so thank you. Before we begin the discussion, I'd like to illustrate a facet of the topic that exemplifies the challenges we're here to discuss and address, and may not be something that all of you have thought about or considered. The bias of voice recognition is a problem we're beginning to see more and more as we step further into the digital age. As of this year, the voice commerce industry is expected to be an $80 billion business, and speech recognition is an essential aspect of many people's lives. However, research has repeatedly shown that voice recognition consistently performs worse for women and for culturally and linguistically diverse people. The way AI is trained to interpret voices by men, most commonly, often means that it's better at understanding male voices. While this bias isn't deliberate, necessarily, I assume, let's give them the benefit of the doubt, it can change the way people use voice recognition technology and how useful they find it in their day-to-day lives. There's also a consideration of the kinds of roles that AI voice-activated assistants have in homes and what image Siri, Alexa, and others present to women and girls. So today our panelists will explore potential solutions to problems such as these and consider how to build a world where everyone's voices are included. So we're going to kick off with Leanne. Leanne, with your experience developing digital technologies yourself and working with so many startup businesses and SMEs over your time, why do you think it's important that digital technology developments include diverse voices? And do you have any examples of how you've done it?
You know, fairness, equity, and diversity is a core strength of our society if we can enhance it correctly. The attribution of skills, whether it's in STEM programs, needs to be extended to what I like to call esteem, by putting entrepreneurship at the very front of STEM. And if we can harness that excitable energy of those problem solvers, the entrepreneurs and founders that want to grasp the future and bring it forward, then the trained libraries of AI, whether it be text to voice or voice to video, has the ability to be trained. It's all about the command and control mechanisms. We are seeing activations in the space with female-led founder companies embracing exactly that. Their entire business is focused on ensuring that's a true right to balance. And we have so much access today to funded capital for female entrepreneurs, governments supporting innovation programs, even corporates embracing intrapreneurship rather than entrepreneurship. So if I cast my mind back to when I left school in 1990, there is more resources, more access to capital today than ever before. It's a willingness, and it's clearly an entrepreneur can succeed when there's a big problem to solve. And let's admit it, this is one of the biggest problems to solve right now, is how do we enable that focus, whether it be in AI alone or other discipline of technologies, to be supported and embraced.
And Leanne, before you mute yourself, I'm also just going to ask an interesting question. So I hope the panelists don't mind as I do this as we go through. As a woman entrepreneur, I hear from other women entrepreneurs in the digital space in particular, that when they go to, for example, venture capitalists, that they find they're less well regarded, less taken seriously, maybe than male entrepreneurs. What's been your experience, not just personally, but in those you've observed in the cohorts you've helped?
I mean, like anything, I think a business needs to target its audience, target its customers, and target the investors. You know, I began Everledger in the heart of London in 2015, where we purposed the blockchain platform to enable transparency. We track diamonds around the world. Now, there's not one investor in Australia that firstly understood the problem or secondly supported our business. But wind forward today, we have 44% across our organization in female dominating roles. And when I say female dominating roles, we have an equal leadership team. You know, our technology team is largely made up of product data scientists, front end and back end engineering, of which there's a fair distribution of women. I think for us, any entrepreneur, it's about targeting the right audience, and not everyone is going to be open and or willing to understand the power and the strength of that particular founder or the particular entrepreneur. For me, my personal story, you know, we've raised just shy of about $45 million US, and so it's been an outstanding success. Has that been because I have a technology background? I've been the CTO for the majority of my career, possibly. But I don't necessarily attribute it to that. I attribute it to there's a decent problem to solve. There is a capability, both within myself and within the wider team, that we could coordinate and execute. And I think it's that proven efficient use of capital, which is what, you know, investors are looking for. What I will say is that Australia has some of the best entrepreneurs in the world, because we roll up our sleeves and we get it done. And if you are willing to get on a plane, like I am in the middle of Canada today, I didn't get here of an hour hop on Qantas. It took me the better part of a day and a half to get here via Hong Kong and Osaka. You know, entrepreneurs that make that effort and put that foot forward, investors treat you seriously. And they often know that it's not just about funding off the back of a PowerPoint presentation, that there's often something when you scratch the surface. The hard work is being done in the backyard of Australia, and many international investors see that and they go searching and looking for it. The issue is the bravery of entrepreneurs to be able to be supported to get on a plane and give it a good red hot go.
Great, thank you. And what we need to do is ensure that our women entrepreneurs and scientists and technologists are imbued with that bravery, and it's not sort of knocked out of them early on, which is sometimes the case as well. Shazia, turning to you and getting maybe slightly more technical now, we've heard in the AI case study I mentioned earlier about the inherent biases that can be in data sets that many technologies exhibit. how can we improve large data sets to achieve gender equity?
Yes, Katherine, thank you for the question, and also, the opportunity to talk about these important issues with such a great audience. So for this question, I think I'd like to use a mirror metaphor, actually, which I've borrowed it from a really nice paper. It was recently published in a computer science, flagship publication. It's very accessible. It's not, very technical or full of jargon. It's Communications of ACM. It's published by a group of data management researchers called Responsible Data Management. So basically what they say is that data is a mirror reflection of the world. And bias in the data can exist because of two reasons. And one is that the mirror itself is faulty. So the data or the collection mechanism or the measurement or the curation processes, that is what introduces the distortion. So for example, a data set may represent a part of the world very well, but other parts may be amplified or diminished. And this is what we call, gender bias or bias of any disadvantaged minority group. And the second reason is that the mirror is perfect, but the world it is reflecting is distorted. So the world as it is and not as it should be. So I think when we see issues of gender bias in data sets, we actually have to ask ourselves, and I'm going to quote these people, if it is a distorted reflection of a perfect world or a perfect reflection of a distorted world. So without this knowledge of the properties of the data, I think we cannot really take any meaningful action to tackle the bias. And of course, it doesn't end there. So if we have this knowledge about the properties of the data, then it is not the data or the algorithm that is going to solve the problem. It is really up to us, individuals, groups, communities, society at large, to figure out what we're going to do about it. And I think some of the examples that you were giving, Katherine, before, and I've also come across this, this recent book by Caroline Perez, which is full of great examples. It's a book called Invisible Women, Exposing Data Bias in a World Designed for Men. So if anyone in the audience is interested, do have a look. You will be blown away. There are just so many examples, everything from clinical trials to seat belts to transport systems and whatnot.
Yeah, clinical trials is one that's cropped up in recent times as a clear issue for how they're conducted and whether the outcomes from those clinical trials reflect the broader world of whatever drug or device they're actually going to be used for, if they've not got the right reflection in the first place. So it's a really interesting area. I work in the Olivia Newton-John Cancer Research Institute board, and it's something we're really conscious of when we're developing clinical trials these days, but I'd have to say that hasn't always been the case. Turning now to Marlene, because we just hit the healthcare topic, which is a perfect segue into your work at CSIRO and the e-healthcare area that you specialize in. So your work focuses on the implementation of healthcare interventions using digital technologies. Are there examples on how lack of diversity in the design stages can lead to poor outcomes for patients or users?
Thanks, Katherine. And it's absolutely a pleasure and an honor to be in the company of these women. And I did see the book. I actually came across that book, Invisible Women, during my research for this, and it is incredible. I was just shocked with some of the examples. So yes, I work in digital health, and it really surged, especially during the COVID-19 epidemic. In our income countries like Australia, women are actually more likely than men to use digital health tools. However, the majority of these tools actually do not address women's health needs and priorities. And even though digital health can bolster gender equity through increased access to healthcare and also empowerment because people own their own data, digital health is rarely designed from a gender equity perspective. Because of lower access and exclusion from app design, and harmful gender stereotypes, digital health tools can actually disadvantage women, especially women with racial or ethnic minority backgrounds. Women are often depicted as a homogeneous group, yet some women are at higher risk of worse health outcomes than others. For example, Indigenous women participate in digital pregnancy services less often, despite the mortality rates of infants of these women remaining higher than those of white women. Digital health apps can also pose security risks. For example, collecting personal data can place users at increased risk of intimate partner violence. Abusers who have access to their victims' phones can monitor their location, access the data that the health apps collects, and even install spyware. Health apps could be mistrusted because they collect very sensitive data. For example, it was pointed out that a popular period tracking app, in addition to just tracking menstruation and other typical hallmarks of fertility monitoring, asked female users to log each time they had sex, including in which position. The data they generated could be shared with developers, advertisers, researchers, and data brokers. And so rather than having the women's health in mind, it was completely about the surveillance of women. Many health apps are gendered, language, and designed. For example, most health apps targeting men are gender neutral, but apps for women have stereotypically female designs. For example, pink colors, hearts, and flowers. And also fitness apps for men often boast about strength and muscles, whereas for females, it focuses on thinness. Gender norms and stereotypes can also harm men. So it's not only women, it can harm men as well. Because of biases, there are fewer parenting apps for fathers, and the few that are there often assume that men are uneducated and uninterested in caring for their infants. Masculinity norms, example, men don't have depression, can lead to lower mental health care seeking, including via mental health digital technology. And therefore you have worse outcomes for men, including triple the risk of suicide compared to that of women. Dangerous gender and racial biases can sneak into algorithms that are used within apps for decision-making. Example, there was a health app where AI advised patients on the probability of diagnosis based on their symptoms that they reported through the app. A female person with symptoms of a heart attack received a diagnosis of depression, and a male user with the same background and symptoms was informed of the possibility of a heart attack. Now, individuals in non-binary categories are also underrepresented in medical research. So if you search terms related to gender identity, health, and technology, you will get very few articles that will address all three of those domains. And so how in my work, because we do design apps and develop apps for women, it is very important to acknowledge the diversity. Think about why you are designing and what you are designing and who you are designing it for, but most importantly, who you are designing it with. So it is really, really important that you have the co-design is not basically just a term that we can tick off. Ask the users what they want. It's not one size fits all. And if you ask the user what they want, actually listen to them. Don't think you know what their needs are better than they know themselves.
Yes, it's I think a really important point you've made as well there, that diversity is actually benefits everybody. We find a lot of men tend to think it means that they will somehow have less of, whether it's control, power, status, money, whatever, but actually everybody benefits in a truly diverse, whether it's gender, cultural, linguistic, all of the aspects of diversity, everybody benefits. We're even seeing young men now with eating disorders, which, you know, again, was not something that we acknowledged before and maybe didn't see as much before, but the more that we include everybody in co-design, the more everybody benefits. And it's not just about women, it is actually about a better world and everybody benefits. So that was a really important point you brought up. And I don't know if everybody's aware, you can ask some questions of our presenters, so please do send them to me. Hopefully I'll be able to see them. I had technology problems today, isn't that perfect? So everybody knows I'm running on an iPad, so hopefully I'll manage to also be able to see the questions and pass them on, but if not, maybe one of our wonderful ATSE team can help me out here. I'm now going to get the wonderful Ronnie to wrap up for us. Ronnie, given all of that, you've come from a background of being an incredibly successful teacher in drama and English. So what prompted you to go back to university to study computing, given how much we hear about the male bastion that it happens to be? What was your thinking there?
For me, it was finally seeing a pathway into the digital space. So growing up, I was in quite a traditional household. I was raised by my Greek immigrant grandparents who are wonderful, but obviously came from a generation where men did one thing, women did the other. And that was partially reinforced in high school as well. You were a humanities student or you were a STEM student. There was no kind of crossover. So I put myself in the humanities box because that was more traditionally female with creative writing, which I enjoy, still can do. But I grew up going, I'm not a STEM person. I'm not a scientist. And even in my 20s, I still had that thought that that's not for me. And it wasn't until I moved to Canberra about 6 years ago that I had a different environment around me and I started to see more female representation. And that's when the thought started of, oh, I can be in this space. And I entered the space as a digital apprentice. So I did a Cert 4 in IT, started 2 years ago, and realized, oh, this is good. This is my interest. This is my skill set. And I was very, very lucky with where I was placed for my apprenticeship. I'm in an IT division that's 43% female. And it's a very encouraging environment here. So representation absolutely matters. Once I could see it, I could go for it. So that's why I'm here now. And I got into the master's. I wasn't sure about it. And then I found out about the Elevate Scholarship, and it was a bit of a, if I get the scholarship, then it's a sign and this is for me. I probably still would have done the master's if I didn't get the scholarship, but you know, you tell yourself these things. So I'm very, very excited to actually be doing it now and being able to say I am a scientist and getting rid of that self-limiting thought that I'm not a STEM person. I'm STEM and humanities, and I'll make those two things work together.
And we've got a number of Elevate scholars, and also I'm hoping and thinking there's some women who are still at school. Maybe you could also share with us where to from here. You'll have your Masters of Computing. What do you see that leading to, and what do you aspire to?
Oh, big question. And I'm very happy to say I don't know. I like the idea of just enjoying my Masters, connecting with people at university, connecting with people as part of the Elevate program. I love where I work now, and there are pathways to go into data science, or I sit next to cloud and database teams who I can turn to and ask questions about what they do. I like the openness of the digital space. And, you know, we're talking about finding problems to solve. That's something that I like to do, find the problem and solve it. So I imagine as part of my Masters, I'm going to come across something and go, ooh, I want to research this. I want to look into this. Currently, we are looking into chatbots. So I'm going to take what I get today and put that into my research project this year.
I think you've also largely answered a question I've got here, which is somebody saying that they identify with your imposter syndrome. And I think it's more that men cover up the imposter syndrome maybe better than a lot of women. I'm guessing there's not many women either around this panel or on the Zoom call that haven't felt it at some time or another. And we all, you know, to this day, I still do that even at my ancient age. So this questioner was asking, how did you break the barrier to identifying as a STEM leader? But I think you've largely answered that. But is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
oh, I'm gonna take from my drama teaching here. One of the #1 rules of improv is yes and. When you're given an offer, say yes and add more to that story to just keep the story rolling. And I take that into these things. So even this panel, for example, when I got the invitation for it, my brain straight away went, oh, I should be on this panel. What do I have to offer? I haven't been in the space for too long. And then I had to go, no, the invitation is the yes, and I'm bringing in my own perspective to it. It is new, and I can't sit there as a teacher. You know, I wanted to be an example for my students, and I still want to be an example moving forward, that get that offer, say yes, and just go for it. Let the imposter thought sit there. But if you're doing the action, that imposter thought goes away.
I like the yes and, you know, even at my really ancient time in life, I'm going to learn something really special today. So thank you. I appreciate that. I have a question here for Marlene. The surveillance of women in health apps, which you just described, of course, when you were talking about that period app, and collection of inferred sensitive data is horrifying when considering this can lead to what this can lead to in big data sets. How extensive do you think this data sharing and harvesting might be?
That is really a good question, because and we in CSIRO have a very, very stringent data privacy policy. Everything that we do goes through a privacy office. And I came across this when I just started my PhD. We were the first people to use a smartphone to collect data after a heart attack, for patients after a heart attack. I went through all the ethics processes, and they asked me like the normal ethics questions. Where do you store the surveys, blah, 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 blah. Never did anybody ask me about the data that was on the phone, how we protect that data. And then I think we did 3 projects after that when they said, oh, you're collecting information on the phone, or who owns the data? So, and that was, it was like a can of worms, because we then had, we provided the patients with blood pressure monitors, with weight scales, with the equipment that they use. But nowadays, we collect all these data through Fitbit, through Garmin, through all sorts of other devices out there. Those manufacturers actually, they pay you, they pay you for your data. I think it's actually quite a big problem, because we don't know where the data sits. If I do any ethics application, I have to ensure them that the data is hosted in Australia, but I can't even do that, because if it's Amazon or Azure, or there's no guarantee for us to say that data won't leave Australia. So yeah, that's a good question. It's it depends on where the data is actually collected from and how they share it. If I say to my health app, I'm using my Fitbit, and I allow that app to take the data from Fitbit, it can go actually anywhere. And it is amazing with this. I spoke with one of my colleagues this morning about this, and she said her daughter was using one of these period tracking apps, and suddenly she was just bombarded by advertisements for fertility clinics, and the data can go anywhere. It's like algorithms are there presenting new ads or collecting data that people they're not even aware that it happens.
Yeah, that's it's disconcerting, isn't it, if there are people who are not good players in terms of how they're going about things. And it's really interesting to make sure that those questions get input into all ethics committees' deliberations about giving the go-ahead to development or clinical trials or any other kind of research. I'm not necessarily sure that everybody else would think of that either. I have one here for Leanne. Question for Leanne: how can we encourage researchers to embrace their entrepreneurial side when they're part of an academic system that favours certainty? And this is one of my pet questions as well. So I'd be really interested in your views on that, Leanne.
Yeah, so I'll favour Queensland actually in my answer. I mean, we have some of the very best universities, UQ, University of Queensland, and QUT, Griffith as well, even JCU in far north Queensland, that have a commercialisation arm that really looks to master those breakout technologies that might necessarily have been sitting at certain tech level readiness statuses. But you need to be able to combine, you know, the true power of this breakout you often see in the bioscience environment, where there's robustness in the innovation itself and robustness in the research, and then coupling that with entrepreneurship. What I do see is a bit of confusion around an innovator. It's very different to an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is where the rubber hits the road. We can master the commercialization, the market entry, know how to engage with customers. And an innovator or a researcher looks at the fundamentals of science. And hopefully the combination, it's very rare to find the two in the one, which is often you'll see companies being started with co-founders, which means one founder has a strength potentially in entrepreneurship or commercialization, and another founder might actually have a research background. We've had incredible breakout technologies like that being supported through incubator programs in universities that are now multi-billion-dollar companies around the world. So what I will say is the best skill that an entrepreneur has is finding certainty in uncertainty, because you live forever in a state of uncertainty. We're uncertain about the commercialization model, where the next large capital influx is coming from. And researchers find themselves in the known known. And it's when the combination of those two come together in the known unknowns and the known knowns where you really do get a breakout. And those breakouts can create either new technologies, they can create new businesses, or they just create new learnings, which is just as important as building a business. That billion-dollar idea is waiting to be solved, but arguably the billion-dollar learnings actually becomes that ingested knowledge that allows you to do it time and time and time again.
And it's interesting, you can think of a couple of different examples of how differently ways people have done it. So Peter Farrell, who is a professor at UNSW, who founded ResMed together with the very bright genius of Colin Sullivan, who developed the CPAP device for sleep apnea. So there was an entrepreneurial engineer together with a researcher who together built what is now a multi-billion-dollar company. Or if you look to Cochlear, where you had the researcher and the entrepreneur who was quite not the technical person. He was a pure entrepreneur, having set up Telectronics and then Cochlear and others. So it's interesting, you don't have to leave university, but if you find an entrepreneur, with him you've got the perfect match of skills. That can also be best. You know, sometimes researchers should stay doing the thing they're brilliant at, and that's research. But finding the right entrepreneur to couple with to take products to market is also another way to do it, rather than having to do it all by yourself.
And I will say, you know, universities in Queensland, even governments, whether it's South Australia or Queensland, now have a chief entrepreneurs office. So it helps with that Tinder-like matching programs between great researchers and amazing entrepreneurs. Some of them grey hairs like me that have been around a long time, and others that just have that ignition energy to start something new. But there's an incredible amount of support that now runs across many states in Australia. And I will keep saying that the Aussie entrepreneurs have got something. Not only do we have incredible natural resources in Australia and natural capital like the Great Barrier Reef, but we have the most incredible natural talent. And I think that's really the harnessing of this.
And that's becoming more well known now. So when, 20, 30 years ago, when I was first doing this sort of stuff, when you turn up in San Francisco, people would go, oh, I love your accent, but hey, you're a bit weird, you're Australian. Now they go, oh, Australians, yeah, we know them. They're really good at this stuff. So the view of Australians overseas has changed, which has been great. They're taken seriously from day one, as opposed to having to work that bit harder to get in the door. Shazia, turning to you, there's been a lot of chat around recently launched AI technologies like ChatGPT. One area, I used it in a strategic planning session recently where I had a strategic plan given to me, And I said, when you come back with the changes to this, can it not look like it was written by ChatGPT? Because, you know, it was just full of management speak. And ChatGPT is really good at that. But thinking about technologies like ChatGPT, not just that, but they're attracting a lot of interest, a growing user base. Are they adequately gender inclusive?
Well, with some degree of confidence, I'll give a short answer, which is no. And if I don't want to be too confident, then I can at least say, well, nobody knows for sure, right? Because these models are very opaque, very black boxy, and consume a large amount of data. So there's a lot that we don't know about it. But I also want to say, like, you know, like so many others, I am also totally wide-eyed about how amazing this technology is. And, you know, also at the same time, it's very new. It holds a lot of potential, but there are some important questions that, you know, we need to ask. And the most important to me is if we are ready, you know, at an individual or a societal level, to use these technologies in a way that is going to benefit not just our, you know, essay writing and our code debugging assignments, but also our productivity, and our sense of equity, our sense of well-being. So just, you know, if we are to just confidently have fun with ChatGPT and the like, and watch these models like almost hallucinate with these wild responses, you know, that give you the impression of greatness, right? Because it's written so well, it seems that it's very, very accurate. But we know that some of it is completely made up. I think there's some key questions and areas that need our attention. And one is, we already talked about, is the quality of the data that goes into it. And in this case, it is training data. And what do we really know about the quality characteristics, you know, related to bias, related to toxicity? The second one, which is really important, and Ronnie touched upon it beautifully previously, but it is the skills shortage problem. I think we've had so many conversations about it, but the problem has not gone away. So the diversity in the pipeline, you know, of training and careers in these advanced technologies, such as data science, such as machine learning, such as AI, to me, that is the powerful weapon that we have to actually shift the dial. And I think there is also a third area of concern, or that needs our attention, is that this progress that we see with these large language models, it's asymmetrical, right? These technologies are in the hands of a few big companies like Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Baidu, Alibaba, Amazon, that's it, right? And they have the bulk of the talent, and the IP and the resources, because the amount of funding they are pouring into it is obscene, and the amount of computational power they are putting into it is, you know, is unbelievable. So it's a fundamental challenge, I think, that we have to tackle collectively on how to make the value of AI and data science and such technologies more accessible.
Yeah, there's a slight side issue there when you talk about the sheer amount of data, is the sheer amount of energy it consumes to do the data gathering and then store it. And, you know, from an environmental point of view, these massive companies with their massive cloud systems that they have are consuming ever increasingly vast amounts of our energy. And that's something we really need to think about and be concerned about in terms of how we can feed them as an energy machine in the future, because they're now taking up percentages of our energy, which, you know, before they were barely moving the dial at all.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Yeah.
I've got a note here rather than a question, so I'll just read it out so that people can take a note. So somebody has asked me to please share with the person that asked about how to bridge academia and entrepreneurship, and I'm guessing there's more than just that one person who find that an interesting thought. So they've suggested a website, which is UNSWfounders, all one word, .com. So if any of you who are interested in that, I'm guessing the person who's given me that website suggests that they've got some ways of helping you. But also, as Leanne said, almost every state has either a chief entrepreneur or other systems within their public service that can also help. So please, do reach out to your local state government people in their departments of industry and innovation and those kind of areas, or seek out a chief entrepreneur if your state has one. So turning to a question now, and I might actually pose this to each of you because I think it's a nice broad question that you might each have views on. So I'm going to start with Ronnie. Are there any current or potential digital advances that make you excited for the future of your field?
Ooh, that is a good question.
Hmm.
I am interested in the chatbots that are happening now and what that means for education. My friends who are still teachers, there's a lot of discussion around students using these bots to complete assignments and moving away from digital exams back to paper, so you can actually see what the students are learning. Even in the coding space, they're saying physical paper exams, so write out your code, which is a scary thought because I use shorthand in code so much. I don't think I could write it out by hand. So I'm very interested to see where education goes with AI. Because I think the students are moving faster than the education system with it now, so which is exciting for the future. We've got some smart future STEM people in the country.
Indeed we have. How about you, Marlene?
Oh, I must agree with the chatbots and the voice agents, because many of our solutions that we've developed, people still have to enter data. It would be very nice if a mom, we've got a solution for women with diabetes in pregnancy. So if you already have a child and you are doing your bloods, instead of having to put your symptoms into an app, if you can just say, Alexa, or whatever you call that chatbot, what the symptom is. So, but just working in the health space and knowing how important it is to get it right is really important. But I think it would be very, very valuable for us if some of the manual entry can be replaced by voice. Sensors, we have some very challenging projects at the moment where we, for example, looking at the energy expenditure for people with severe burns. And you have to get it right, because if you overfeed, and these people are in the hospital, in the ICU quite often, they cannot slap wearables on them because obviously the bodies are burned. They often feed them the patients through tubes. And if you overfeed them, they will die. If you underfeed them, they will die. Because overfeeding the organs give in. If you underfeed them, the body will start using other parts to get the energy from. So we are looking, and I'm very fortunate that I work with a bunch of very clever engineers and biomedical engineers and sensor people, where we're looking at not necessarily wearables that you put on you to detect pulse, heart rate variability, body temperature. So when we started with our digital platforms, most of it was self-report. Nowadays, we want to move away from that self-report and have sensors that can actually tell you if somebody is stressed, if they are depressed. But we have to get it make very sure that it's accurate, especially when we start then bringing in algorithms for diagnosis. We work very, very closely with the TGA, because many of our digital solutions at the moment that would usually be a well-being app is going into that space of software as a medical device. It's very challenging, but also very satisfying to work in this space and see the progress that they're making.
Thank you. Shazia?
Yes, very good question. And I think it's such a fast changing field. And I've been in the field all, 3 decades or so. So certainly, I think we are in game changing times right now. And the two big ones for me are quantum and AI. I wouldn't talk too much about quantum because I don't understand it that well. But with regards to AI, I mean, what really intrigues me and also concerns me is that this is not the first time we've seen an upsurge in interest in AI. So there have been these so-called AI winters, in the past. There have been 2 of them. Where AI was going to change the world or robots were going to take over or something, and it just didn't work. So one was very early on in the 50s, and then it was again in the 80s, with the expert systems. But what we've got right now, I think, is like a perfect storm or the perfect recipe with the large amount of data that is accessible to us, the compute power, and more importantly, of course, is the resources, the talent that is going into developing these, what we are calling them foundation models. There's a very nice paper from the Stanford group, and they call these the opportunities and risks of foundation models. And GPT-3, on which ChatGPT sits, is one of those foundation models. And indeed, they cover language, they cover vision, they cover speech. And we've seen this progression just in the last 10 years. It's not too much, of course, there's a bigger history of what Leanne calls, invention, innovation, and then entrepreneurship. So I think we are indeed in interesting times, and these developments have really brought the technology home to us. So it's it's at our fingertips. So my kids are using it. My mom is using it. So it's not just something which is sitting in labs, and that relevance, I think, is very exciting, because hopefully that will promote the excitement to more girls. We still sit under 20% with women in computer science. So that relevance hopefully will attract more girls into it. And to me, educating girls and putting more girls into technology careers and training is the way to overcome all these bias and diversity issues we were talking about.
Thanks, Shazia. And Leanne, especially not just in your own company, but also with the other startups that you've helped over the years, what excites you about the future of this field?
Yeah, look, following on from the professor, because my brain was going in the same sort of paradigm shift, rather than talking about particular applications with industry or certain use cases to solve. We're seeing this amazing breakthrough where the technology becomes ubiquitous, nearly it disappears into the background. We saw that in the first generation of the internet when protocols were released like HTTP or SMTP. Today, we don't even speak about it. We don't get excited because it drives that front-end user application of, say, email or internet browsers. So I think what is incredible is not the fact that GPT is somewhat disruptive. In fact, it's not. It's actually the baseline protocols that have broken through, because the computer science itself has disrupted. And once we start to see those protocol breakouts, and the usability of that come across the everyday person, then we will start to see incredible applications being born. We have amazing exponential technologies that exist, whether it be blockchain or AI or even the material science and symbiotic science and synthetic science that's really running. But it's when the combinations of those come together that, for me, is the most exciting moment in time. And I think I'm going to get to see it. Might be in a nursing home, but I reckon I'm going to be watching from the sidelines saying, go girls, take over the baton.
Yeah, fantastic. I think that's a great way to frame it. Something that, another question I have here is, should there be an increase in transparency of the audiences that are used in the development of products? And would that make a difference to drive developers increasing the diversity of their data sets? That might be one for you and Shazia and Marlene. Shazia, do you want to kick off?
Yes, I think it's a very good question and really important time. So certainly, you know, data-driven insights hold a lot of power, and even in the last, you know, few years, these data-driven insights has been in everybody's face. You know, all these measures and numbers related to COVID, like this rate or that rate or this count, the famous R0, you know, metric, and so on. So I think these data-driven insights are powerful because they influence policy, they influenced our mobility, they are influenced our behavior, and qualified data scientists who have the skills to create those insights. I think they hold the trigger to that power. If we are to really shift the dial in terms of you know, who is behind the development of these advanced technologies that we were just talking about, then again, you know, the point I made before is that our best investment will be in getting more women to take up computer science and data science degrees and careers. I think that's the best mechanism to mitigate these biases, to increase that transparency in data and algorithms. I also just want to make a point that, you know, when we talk about these things, we talk about the cutting edge, you know, so like what Ronnie is doing, you know, data science, cutting edge, top universities, and really well-resourced labs. But I also, you know, I'm really inspired by Malala Yousafzai. You know, she's got the Nobel Prize in 2014. She's a bit younger than my older daughter. She comes from the Swat Valley. I remember going there during my summer vacations as a child. And so, you know, when she says, I'm not one voice, but I'm 66 million girls who are deprived of education. You know, I couldn't agree more that the fight for gender equity is a big one. And it's not just at the cutting edge level, but it's at all levels. But education is still our most powerful weapon.
And of course, particularly poignantly rammed home to us in recent events in Afghanistan and their treatment of girls right the way from primary school to university. It's terrifying, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Marlene, would you like to add to that question? Then I'll get a wrap-up comment from everybody.
Oh, I think it's really, really important because if you, for example, collect your data set for insulin titration on mainly male participants or users of a certain solution, and then you use that algorithm that you've developed for the titration for a woman that is much smaller, I mean, it could really harm. So, and I'm just talking now from the medical field because that's the space that I move in, but it would be, I think, relevant to anything else. That you know how that algorithm was built, not only the data, but also the volume of the data before you can trust that. Yeah,
it's really important. Even some of the most basic things in clinical trials, you know, how those are actually designed and the quantities that they're using and so on, are they designed to take into account women's physiology, which is not only smaller, but different in many other respects. Okay, now we're coming close to the end of our time, so I'm going to get one more question to each of you. You might like to try this one for me, Ronnie. As consumers, how do we make our voices heard, do you think, and ensure that technologies are working for us as women? What have you, what thoughts do you maybe have about that?
Oh, I think with that, representation matters, and if you don't see it, be it. We've got so many avenues now to share our voice to the companies that are responsible for a lot of things that don't have gender or cultural diversity. So I think it's about recognizing that your voice matters and sharing it, getting rid of those self-limiting thoughts and putting yourself out there. That's what's going to make change.
It would also be valuable. So I was on the National Health and Medical Research Council, and we had somebody on the council who came from a consumer perspective. So at any council meetings when we were discussing our grants programs and so on, she had a voice on behalf of consumers, and that was her unique skill that she brought to the council table. So more of that would also be really valuable, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Design thinking, maybe I might try Leanne on a question here. I'm trying to get to as many of the questions as I can, and I'm sadly not going to get to all of them now. It's clear we've had a sudden flurry of excitement, so my apologies if we've missed your question. But design thinking is a framework that's incredibly popular. Why is innovation in tech seemingly so poor in the first discovery phase and empathizing with stakeholders, including the accessibility and inclusivity of women? Seems to be a huge disconnect between design thinking and the tech sector. What are your thoughts?
It all starts at school. Let's start there. I mean, how many of our children are really educated in design thinking, I think, and also within some of our universities, design thinking is often the third wheel that's clunked onto the side of a degree. So I think at the very core is that we're not placing it at the core of a skill set enhancement. Certainly, we have an entire UX UI team that embeds completely with our customer base and runs personas. And I think entrepreneurs, to a certain extent, if you're trying to find that customer product fit, which is a very different ideation to product market fit, then design thinking is the core element for the reality check that your product might look good to you, but if it doesn't work for the end user, then it ain't going to scale.
And that comes back to including consumers, including women, and so on, doesn't it? So that you've got the full audience of the likely users of your product. So then I've got one more question each for Marlene and Shazia. Let me see. Sorry, I'm just trying to read them all as we go. Shazia, how do we ensure that the big players, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon, are held accountable for building panels that create space for intersectional approaches to app building? And should it be consumer-driven or government-led through policy? Do you have any thoughts about that? Kind of throwing you some curveballs here.
Yes. I mean, these are really massive and powerful organizations. I think with the pace of development of technology has been so fast that both the regulatory frameworks and even the societal expectations or acceptance of that is lagging behind. We are using it first and then realizing, oh, there's something wrong with it. And certainly, in Europe, some of the new regulations that have come up, including the GDPR and some others, with regards to data privacy, consumer rights, are picking up some of that slack. We do have some mileage to cover, and it is a really tough problem of our times. About how to balance the technological pace and the amazement with which we meet that technological developments and the societal benefits and potential harms and the regulations that need to be put in place. So lots to do.
Thanks, Shazia. And Marlene, you're going to get the last word. And I'm not so much asking you a question because we're right out of time, but what would be the last word you'd like to leave our audience with?
I would say use the opportunities that you're given, especially with forums like this. It's just amazing women to be on a panel with. And if there's opportunity to network through IMNIS, through ATSE, just use those opportunities. And use every single opportunity that's given to you, just grab it. Don't say no, say yes.
Or maybe we should just leave Ronnie with the last word, say yes and.
Yes and. Yeah.
So actually I'm going to give Ronnie, I think it would be best. You give us our last word on top of that.
Oh, big pressure. Just do it. Get rid of those fears. There's that talk, women won't apply for a job if they don't meet 100% of the criteria. Let's get rid of that. Just go for it. No doesn't exist. Yes, and.
Excellent. I think that's a perfect way to wrap up. I'd love to thank you all. It's been wonderful listening to you. I have learned from all of you, not least Ronnie, but all of you. The Ronnie's one I will be utilising, I think, even this afternoon. So I'm really grateful for your insights, for your time, and for sharing what your thoughts are with our team at ATSE, and then all those wonderful people out there listening to this chat. I hope it's been useful to you. Really appreciate you tuning in for it. So grateful that you want to spend an hour of your time listening to us, as well as an hour of the panelists' time sharing their thoughts and insights. So enjoy the rest of your day, everybody. Enjoy this week that includes International Women's Day. I'm sure you're all attending various other events to celebrate it as well. And yes, and a gin and tonic, please. That was Leanne on a different time zone, just quickly saying. She's on a very different time zone to us, and so please go and enjoy it. Thank you, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.